All right, here we are. Good morning on the left side of the globe, and good evening on the right side of the globe, where Robin is from. We're just about a minute away from getting started, so we'll give folks a few moments to join in. Good to have you, Robin. We'll do a proper introduction here in just a couple moments
So
um, as folks
it's this
join
time of year.
in.
It's this time of year where it's so dark here. I have all the lights on in my
Yeah,
room.
yeah, no, it's literally the beginning of my day and the end of yours.
Uh,
So,
yeah,
well, as you mentioned, it's the end of the sunlight time, but not the end of your day.
no,
Um, so we just got a little notification from LinkedIn says we're going live, so people should be jumping in here in a
good,
minute. And once we hit the top of the hour, we will get going.
excellent.
Just give it a quick minute, and here we are. So, all right. Well, welcome to this second of my Top Voice Tuesdays, and I'm super excited to
I'm
have
guest
on
number two.
your guest number two. Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Well, you were going to be one, and then remember we had to schedule things, so
Yeah,
you
I know.
missed
I
out.
know. That's
You
my it's
gotta
my bad.
you gotta be quick to the game. It's great to introduce Robin Daniels. Robin, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a little bit more depth. For folks joining in, please do put in the chat where you're joining in from. We will take a question or two as we go. So would love to have just from around the world. Robin happens to be in Copenhagen today. I'm in Sacramento. So we are separated by 9 time zones, I think, or seven, 8 time zones.
Nine. Yeah.
9. Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
So Robin is the chief business and product officer at ZenAI. So Robin, just tell us a little bit about what that is, what you do, how you do it, and we're going to jump right in.
yeah. I'm the chief business officer, which is kind of this weird title, and I basically focus on product marketing, go to market. I have this nebulous title on purpose when I was speaking to the CEO about what I needed to do, what they needed me to do, and so on. I mean, I basically get involved in everything in the business. I don't run everything, to be clear. We have a lot of very smart people, but I get involved in everything. I have a lot of experience after spending more than 2 decades of my life in lots of the fastest growing companies, most iconic companies that we know, including Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box,
Yeah.
WeWork, Matterport, and so on. So I'm trying to bring that experience to ZenAI in all its ways to help us grow and scale faster.
Yeah. Good to see you, Michael Malone. I see a chat. So if you see in the chat right there, Robin, Michael was one of
I
my
see it.
clients
Yeah,
he was one of my clients years ago. So he's out in Colorado. He's a good guy.
uh,
You actually
I
should
love.
should meet him
I
for a
love
lot of
Colorado.
reasons.
It's one of my favorite places. Give a shout out to let me know where you're from. I'm in Copenhagen right now. I split my time between Europe and the US.
Yeah, that's great. Robin, how do you get that job? You just described
Mm,
it's a pretty unique kind of
mm,
backstage pass that allows you to move across a number of different areas.
mm.
How does that evolve? How do you land in a role like that?
Well, I think of it this way. I mean, I do a lot of coaching and mentoring of young people, and I think about my own career and how I got here. So, in the beginning of your career, I think you start out in some fields anyway as a generalist. I started out kind of like as a little bit of a marketing generalist, but that's very hard, I think, to achieve mastery if you're kind of never great at something. I think at
Yeah,
some point in your career, I think you've got to figure out like what is it that you're really good at. And so within marketing, that's kind of where my career grew from. I took the path of product marketing. There's brand marketing, there's revenue marketing, there's partner marketing, there's all kinds of different subcategories within marketing. I became focused on product marketing. And I think I mastered that craft. And so I became known in the industry to be somebody that you would call if you needed somebody who's great at storytelling, category creation, brand building, really kind of disrupting an industry. And that led me to get a couple of CMO jobs. So I ended up being
yeah,
chief marketing officer for a couple of different companies who really needed those superpowers. And after doing that for a couple of years and at a couple of different companies, taking some companies public, then you get to a point in your life when you have a little bit more choice. But you
yeah,
only get to this point if you really kind of go all in and you master some things along the way. So you're known for being really good at a couple of different things. So when it came to this opportunity, I was looking at some chief marketing officer roles, some chief growth officer roles, and lots of different interesting things. And I was speaking to the CEO of ZenAI, with just over 200 people now, kind of mid-scale startup. And I said, I love marketing, but I also want to grow my own career and my own life. I want to challenge myself to learn something new. and we just chatted about where I have passion. I love product. I love go to market. So I kind of get involved in everything related to product and go to market in the business. But I have this kind of weird title on purpose because I want it to be expansive enough that I can kind of end up doing everything. And
Yeah.
also, like, you can fit everything into it. Again, to be clear, I don't run everything in the business, right? But
Right.
I can get involved in a lot of things. So but you get there, I think, and it's what I try to recommend to a lot of people. I mean, at some point in your life, at some point in your career, you have to go all in. You can't do it all the
Yeah.
time because you'll burn out. But you have to figure out when that moment is, when you've got the chance, you got somebody who believes in you, you're working on a really cool project, you've got a good manager in a good company. That's your moment to, like, probably go
Yeah.
all in. You can do it for a little sustained period, but it creates enough momentum in your life that you can then start choosing. For me, it was at Salesforce. I was there early enough, went all in on the product I was leading, and it created so much momentum around me because I started, doing really well in that role. And so the next job that came and found me was Box, and they just basically said, "Whatever you did at Salesforce, come do it for us because we
Come
want
do
to
it
be the
again.
next
Right.
Salesforce." And so it
Right.
was like that started my momentum in my career, and since then, people have been good enough to find me, and I don't have to look anymore myself.
Yeah, no, that's great. And one of the things we're going to dive into here in just a minute is the topic of culture. That's what we're here to talk about today. And just a
Mhm.
reminder, and I see you, Jason Koshi from Tampa. Jason's also a former colleague of mine, so I
Oh,
got the
hey,
crew
Jason.
here on board. Other folks that jump in, please do let us know where you're dialing in from. So. One of the things we're going to talk about is culture, and it's a
Mhm.
topic near and dear to my heart, and I know to yours. Before we do
Mhm.
that, we're here because we're both top voices, and so would
Mhm.
love, now that we've heard about your career, how did you become a top voice? What did you do on LinkedIn? How did you get there? What does that mean? A lot of people are curious as to how we arrive at this designation.
It's the weirdest thing, I'll tell you, Michael, because I both know and I don't know. And what I mean is, it's obvious why, because I post a lot and people find value in my post, but I have no idea the
Yeah,
mechanism behind how they chose me. It's not like there's a playbook for it. One day I just got an email from LinkedIn saying, "Hey, we've chosen you to be a top voice." So I mean, I had no expectation of this. I wasn't aiming for it. I just continue posting because I enjoy the community aspect. I love
yeah,
learning, engaging, sharing my knowledge and wisdom and so on. And I assume that's the reason they chose me. So I know that's when I say I know, I think that's the reason why. But I don't know the magic behind how. So if anybody aspires to be a top voice, it's about having a point of view, posting
yeah,
things that are value, that get engagement and sparks conversation in a positive way. I think they really look for that, and then being consistent about it. Don't just jump in and out of it, but
yeah,
commit to maybe 3 times a week, maybe 5 days a week, whatever it is that's right for you. I do it pretty much every day, but that's not right
yeah,
for everybody. You don't
yeah,
have to, but commit to something so you start getting that mastery of the medium itself and how you actually do it really well. I've gotten better over time. When I first started my journey, it wasn't that great, and now I feel like I've become pretty
yeah.
comfortable in it.
You've got great photos. I'll tell you that. You have some of the best photos. I mean, for
Give that
me,
for that.
you mentioned a couple, sort of shooting your shot and going all in. 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I started my own company, and I started to really post. About 2 years ago, I started posting on LinkedIn about change and transformation. And I
Mhm,
think my story, similar to yours, I talked about one thing a
mhm,
lot. And that I think drives some recognition in the platform that, hey, this is someone that has a point of view. And then I didn't do a lot of
mhm,
photos. I did a lot of kind of Adam Grant
mhm,
style
mhm,
posts with a lot more long form content. I was really surprised at how well that performed. You always hear about, just do a quick video, 30 seconds, people don't have an attention span. I've been really surprised
mhm,
at how much folks have really liked to
mhm.
read that. And of course, I wrote a book, and today is the pre-order launch day for that. So we talk about that in a little bit. But a big piece of that was the repetition, as you mentioned. I posted about
Mhm,
once a week,
mhm,
and so yeah, I got the same email, and it's kind of crazy. But for folks who are interested in how this happened, it's repetition,
mhm,
it's a point of view.
mhm,
I was a little bit provocative. I'm not going to lie
mhm,
about, I had a point of view that a lot of stuff we do around change doesn't work. And
mhm,
I tried to blow a hole right through the middle of that. And I wasn't afraid to talk about it. So to your point, it should be good and
mhm,
positive. I wasn't
mhm.
cutting
Yeah, yeah,
anyone down, but I was
sure.
challenging, those sort of
Mhm,
point of views. So So let's talk about a point of view in culture and your journey.
Mhm.
And this idea of culture being so important. What was
Mhm.
the when was the moment for you
Mhm.
that you knew culture was sort of the central point of an organization? What was the
Mhm.
thing that started this culture journey for you?
I think it actually started when I was a teenager, if I'm honest about it. I mean, I come from a dysfunctional family. My parents got divorced when I was fairly young. And I was always enamored with the stories I was hearing about, reading about Silicon Valley and the tech companies, especially around tech companies, to be honest. And where culture felt more like just a place where you could be yourself. Didn't matter who you were, where you were from, what you kind of your background was. So everyone was kind of like this oddball group of people coming together to change the world. And I kind of just always loved that. And so when I was 21, I moved over to California from Copenhagen. I bought a one-way ticket, didn't have a job or a place to stay, but I always wanted to be part of that. And so my first couple of jobs I ended up landing, which I landed through Craigslist, which is still around, and looks honestly the same as it did when I first came to the US in
Wow,
2000.
that's a
It's
phrase I
amazing.
haven't heard in a
It's just
while.
like a time machine, yeah. But I landed my first job through Craigslist. But I started feeling the culture then for real when I first moved over. I could really see that there was just something about this idea that we treat people as adults. You can kind of choose um, when you work, how you work, as long as you get the job done. It's like,
Yeah,
and it was so different from the world because I actually had a few jobs in Denmark before I moved over that were very much like 8 o'clock you come in, 12 o'clock you take your lunch break for 30
right.
minutes, then you continue until 4 o'clock and then everyone leaves. And it's like, and I was actually working in a high tech company in Denmark that had that cadence, and I'm just like, even though I'm working in a high tech company, it feels like I'm in a factory. And so when I first
Wow.
moved to the US, I just felt like they were so ahead of the game when it came to how do you innovate on culture to create an environment where people can be themselves and be the best version of themselves. That, and of course, because all the data shows that if you can figure out ways to motivate people, inspire people, then they can show up every single day and they'll do better work. And so, but I also think that times have changed. Culture is something that's not static. Now that 25 years later, here in 2025 versus when I first moved to the US, I think so much in the last 10, 15 years, companies thought that culture meant ping pong tables and foosball tables and free kombucha and tap and pizza nights and all this stuff. And you know
Right.
what? Of course it helps, like it brings people a little bit together, but that's not ultimately what
Yeah.
motivates people to be part of something bigger than themselves, or else the data would not be going in the wrong direction, right? Right
Right.
now, 2 out of 3 people want to quit their jobs. It was the same last year, same the year before. If you look at Gallup and Forbes and all the data, and it's obvious because now what people want from a culture is different. They want empowerment, they want motivation, they want
Yeah.
inspiration, they want mentorship and coaching. The reason why 2 out of 3 people want to quit their jobs when you dig into the data is because people feel stuck. They feel like nobody's looking out for them. They're not learning, they're not growing, they're not developing themselves in any way. So culture, I think, has morphed from something that was about bringing people together physically to something about how do we actually get people to be the best that they can be, whether that's remotely or hybrid or in office, it doesn't really matter. But that's what the next generation really craves, is this idea that culture is a place where, of course, I can be myself, but also where I can learn and grow and develop and to become something that is aspirational for me and my future.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. And I want to talk about the dimensions of culture and sort of
Mhm.
how to build it. But you and I talked when we were getting ready about the moment where you became
Mm.
obsessed with culture in your
Yeah.
own career, and what happened to you to take this point of view.
It was so I joined Salesforce in 2007. I actually started in the UK with Salesforce, and then at the end of 2009, I moved over to headquarters in San Francisco. And then I moved over because I was ambitious. I wanted to kind of see my career excel. But
Right.
what really struck me was the culture of excellence that I saw over there in those early days of Salesforce. We were over 1,000 people, but we weren't like a huge company at that point. And I remember being part of this group of product marketing leaders. Um, and I just felt like it was working with like the Navy SEALs of the industry. I felt like it was such an honor and a privilege to come and work with these people every day. They were so smart. They worked super hard, but they also looked out for each other. There was like this sense of camaraderie that we were in it together. And it wasn't just in our team, but it was also came from the top. Mark Benioff, I think, is a phenomenal leader who really knows how to create a vibe within a company that you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. And that's when I really
Yeah.
felt that for the first time. Like for Mark Benioff, it was never just about creating a company that was selling CRM software, right?
Right.
It's like, that's a little boring when you think about it. It was about disrupting something and create a company that was all about, can we actually change the equation of what it means to think about success for the customer and for us in equal measure. This is what cloud computing or software as a service is all about, is that you only win, we only win if you win, meaning if you use the technology and so on. So they kind of created that. But it
Yeah.
started with Mark Benioff having a different vision for what the culture could be. I mean, if you would walk around the halls of Salesforce in those early days and have conversations with people, the passion you would feel from people about what the company was doing and the change we were affecting in the world was like talking to a religious person in some ways.
Wow.
And that's
Yeah.
when I really felt the power of that conviction and energy and passion for the person. And it came right from the top and it seeped through every single person there. And then I think so many companies that I worked for along the way, one of the things that I seek out then now, or even from my Salesforce days, was always, are these people so passionate that they believe in what they're doing? And it can go too far. I've seen that too in my career, right?
Yeah.
In
Oh
some
yeah.
ways,
Yeah. Yeah.
some of the companies
Yeah.
I've worked
We can
for,
talk about it.
we can certainly talk about that too. But in some ways, this is what I'm attracted to. I'm not always attracted just to the money I can make or the potential of the company. I want to work for something that's bigger than myself. The three things that kind of are my core North Star points. Number one is purpose. Number two is impact. And number three is people. What I mean is, number one, am I fighting for something worth fighting for that I can be
Yeah.
excited for every single day? And that's why I'm saying about Salesforce. Yes, we were selling a CRM system, but that was not the story we kind of told ourselves. We're like, we're
Right.
disrupting an ancient industry that needed disruption, right? We were like religious warriors. So the purpose was worth fighting for. Number two, can I make a difference in that purpose? I
Right.
think that really motivates you and keeps you going, especially through the dark times or the hard times.
Yeah.
Like if you feel like you're making a difference towards that path, you can really stay motivated. And that's a key part of culture, is that resilience that you can build into a culture. And then three, about people, like people demanding excellence from each other. Are they setting a higher standard without being assholes, right? Because they can easily veer into
Yeah.
asshole territory where people
Yeah.
get too aggressive or they look out for themselves. And I've seen that too. But it's more rare, I think. I mean, most people in general are fairly good and they want to do the right thing. But you certainly I've certainly met my share of assholes along the way. But can you be surrounded by people who are just like the best of the best, who want to excel, but also who look out for each other? I love this term. One of my favorite terms in the world is esprit de corps, which is really around taking pride um, and being part of a group.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
it comes from the army, but it's really
Yep.
just the sense that you're part of something a little bit bigger, and it's not about me so much anymore, which of
Yeah.
course it can also be, but it's about the benefit of what's in it for everyone that you're working with.
Yeah. So let's talk about the downside, and I want to encourage everyone that, like, please put in the chat if you've got a question for Robin, for us, about culture. I'd love to hear a culture story from someone. Tell a story when culture worked and tell a story when culture didn't. And I want to talk about when it doesn't, because that's
Mhm.
the title of this podcast, or this episode, is about how to create a culture where people don't dread coming to work. Because everything you said, I'm gonna provoke a conversation. Everything you said sounds great until the sort of shit hits the fan, and
Mhm.
we struggle with a toxic leader,
Mhm.
a bad strategy, a bad quarter. How do
Mhm.
we how do this all sounds great until you've got to
Mhm.
test the cultural strength of your organization, because this sense of belonging, this sense of purpose, the sense of, I believe all of that, I do that for
Mhm.
clients all
Mhm.
the time. But we know that it gets hard when things get hard. How do you
Mhm.
approach that? How do you think about that? How do you resolve that reality of executive and business incentives that are
Mhm.
about performance, and sometimes culture
Mhm.
takes a back seat to that, right?
And it shouldn't. And one of the main problems is that nobody's held accountable to the values that companies espouse. One of the things that
Yeah.
frustrates me to no end, when I go into all these companies, I've done a lot of consulting work, I've worked at a lot of companies, you see all these values listed on the wall.
Yeah.
Get shit done. We're accountable. We trust each other. We collaborate. And I'm just like, and okay, how are you measuring this? How are you
How are
holding
you
people
doing it? Yeah.
accountable? Right. And so because people, or companies, I should say, don't really know how to do that, they go back to the thing they've always done, which is chase profits or growth at all costs. And what
Yeah.
does that do when you chase growth at all costs? You'll cut corners. You'll allow toxic behaviors because, hey, that person's really good. They might be a jerk, but they're really good at what they do. So you start tolerating stuff that you really shouldn't be tolerating, and that creates a culture that people absolutely hate coming into when they're those jerks in the culture.
Yeah.
I had an example in my life where I came into WeWork, and I was leading a team of close to 400 people. Right, it's like the biggest team
Wow.
I've ever led. I was the chief marketing officer there, and there were some amazingly smart people there, and I still contact with lots of them. But there was one person who was super toxic, and everybody dreaded working with this person. And if I self-reflect and I'm honest about it, I didn't take action on that person quickly enough
Mm,
because they were really good at what they did, and
yeah.
I was worried about the performance impact it might have, and so on. I was like, but you know what? That was a cowardly move, if I'm honest about it, because I should have done what's the best thing for the health of the group. And it ended up being that some people ended up leaving because they didn't just want to work in that environment or that group, you know. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things. But I've learned along the way, and I've also done it the right thing many times. But that's one example where I'm like, you shouldn't tolerate that because it ruins it for everybody. But I think the way you solve it, Michael, is simple, but not easy. Simple, but not easy. Is that you have to hold people accountable to the behaviors that you expect people to have. So it's fine to have these values that you hold dear. So I have a new equation for how do you create a great culture. I call it input plus output equals outcome. And it used to be all we cared about was outcome. All the rest
Right.
is kind of like, right. And
Right.
now I think it's very different. So what is an input? An input is the way you show up every day, the energy, conviction, the collaboration, the excitement that you have. Are you adhering to our values and all of these different things, right? That's an input. It's not easy to always show up with energy and excitement and conviction every day. But
No.
you know what? You can control this 100%. Doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it's easy.
Attitude and effort. Those are the two things we can control. Right.
If you have a shitty morning or your kid is being a jerk or somebody cut you off in traffic or you're late for something, of course it's going to affect your mental. It doesn't change the fact, if you ask me, that you can control the way that you show up every single day. The moment you step into your first meeting, you're to have your first conversation. So input, that's that. Output, you can also control 100%. And what is an output? Well, it's the thing that you put out there, new HR policy, a new sales
Right.
spiff. Maybe it's a new marketing campaign. Is it best in class? Does it stand by the messages that we care about? Is it aligned with who we are? Are we proud of this work? You can control that too. And but what you can't control is outcome. And what I mean is, like, once you put something out there, let's say a new marketing campaign, you don't know if a competitor suddenly is going to put out something the day before that's better than yours, or a
Yeah.
war starts in Ukraine, or there's this global pandemic that starts.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have aspirational, data driven goals. But what I mean is that you also need to start rewarding people's inputs and their outputs. What I'm saying is that instead of saying 100% of your reward is based on outcome, maybe it's a third, a third, a third, right? So yes, of course, we will still reward great outcomes because it means you've
Yeah.
shown up every day. If your goal is to reach 100 million in revenue as a company, and you show up with a shitty attitude, the work you're doing is not great, are you going to hit 100 million?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not.
But if you
Right.
show up with a great attitude, you do the work, you have a great team environment around you, the stuff you put out there is great. Are you going to be closer to hitting 100 million? Absolutely. It doesn't mean you're going to do it 100%, but so the input and the output absolutely affects the outcome. And I want to
Yeah.
start rewarding the input and the output and holding people accountable to those behaviors. Because until you do so, we're going to be stuck in this where all we care about is the growth and the outcome and the profits.
Yeah. There's you've said a lot in there, and I wanna jump on a couple things.
Sure.
There was an old Simon Sinek. I don't think it was in his TED talk. I remember seeing him
Mm,
talking about the Navy SEALs. You brought that up, and
mm,
this idea that they would rather have someone they trust
mm.
more than someone who was a higher performer among the team. And what you're
Right.
describing is a bit of, can I rely on you as a
Mm-hmm.
teammate to give maximum effort and
Mm-hmm.
sort of maximum attitude. I coach athletes. I say this to my son. We had literally shirts, right? Attitude and effort
Yeah.
are the two things you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
control. And in organizations, you brought up this idea of values, and I'm actually helping a client right now. There are 84,000 people. They've never had enterprise corporate values, and
Wow.
now they've come a long way, but they were really realizing, wow, we
Mm-hmm.
we are a lot of people in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a set of norms that define who we are. and how we
Mm,
show up. And what do values do, right? Values, they give you a lens for decision
mm,
making in uncertainty, right? So
mhm.
if I have four values that I'm aligned to and something happens that I don't know the answer to, I know how to
Mhm.
find an answer consistent with that. But to your
Oh.
point, I've got to act a certain way. And this is the thing that I always rival or kind of marvel at is people spend a lot of time on values and they make
Mhm.
great posters and they don't spend time on the behaviors that line up to
That's
those,
right.
right? What am I
That's
supposed
right.
to do, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like any relationship, right? I want to,
Mhm.
I want you to trust me. I want you to have confidence in me,
Mhm.
whatever it is. Well, I got to do certain things to sort of,
Yeah.
maximize that. So how do you build that trust in an organization that you're going to be consistent with the values
Mm.
that we've stated? What does that look like
I,
from your
I think a lot of it comes down to there are two things that are really important. There are many things, but but for time, let's simplify. Number one is clarity around what you expect, what your goals are, and what you expect people to do to impact those goals. That's number
right?
one. Is that clarity is everything. That's why I always kind of coach and teach. Is that clarity? It's very hard to achieve greatness or have trust because without clarity, you're going to have a lot of friction.
Yep.
Whose job is this? Who's doing that? And it creates just like a distrustful environment, lots of lack of joy. So that's number one. So once you have that, and then the second thing is that your say-do ratio, what you say and what you do, has to be
I
more or
love
less
this. Yeah.
100%, 1-to-1, right? Maybe not always, because it's there's a lot of fast-moving environments. There will be some things that you have to change. But if you say you're going to do something, then go do it. And the more you veer from that, then it just creates an environment of trust. Well, you said you were going to promote me if I did this, and now you promoted this person instead. That creates distrust. Oh, you said that we were going to get funding for this project, but now it went over here. You're not consistent with what you said. So if your say-do ratio is completely off, it creates an environment where people's motivation and trust in each other and the organization will just start lagging. And
Yeah.
so you see that oftentimes when the what leaders say and what they do is incongruent with actually what they aspire to, and it just creates horrible environments. So it's a
Yeah.
simple way of doing it. Like if you think about your projects and your leaders, the say-do ratio, how is that compared
Yeah.
to what you're trying to achieve?
I have another client that I'm working with right now, and they're smaller, and
Mm,
they made a set of executive commitments. They're 7 or 8
mm,
behaviors or kind of values, and they have behaviors underneath it, and they're posted in the conference room. And I've been in meetings with them, and I've turned around and looked at the board and said, "Somebody just violated that one. Are we? This is on the wall. Are we doing any of? Do these things mean anything to anyone?" And this idea of
it's
sort
hilarious.
of
Oh,
accountability is, I
mhm,
think, to your point, is their say do ratio is it doesn't even exist. And I love that
mhm,
phrase for people that are kind of, here and want to take something away. I think, this idea of sort of purpose, impact, and people, right? These three
mhm,
dimensions of culture that, why are we here and what are we doing? How can you
mhm.
contribute to that? And who's next to you, to the left and the right,
That's
in
right.
the foxhole, so to speak, of this
Yeah,
culture that we're trying to build? Because you know, culture is also something that exists in time and space. It's
yes,
transferable, right? And
yes,
so I have to transmit culture from me to you through the
that's right.
experience of our actions. And what you're giving us is this
Uh,
great say do formula of,
yeah.
if I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, right?
Mhm,
It's like sort of kids and puppies, right? Like
mhm.
they'll watch you. If you don't do what you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
you were going to do, they'll be like, what's going on, right? This doesn't make sense to me.
I'll tell you. I'll give you an example. I worked at LinkedIn for a while, and they were one of the best companies to actually follow the values that they had set out. And one of the values was that members come first, meaning that we never want to lose the trust. We saw what was happening with Facebook and Twitter and so on, how they were
Right.
just kind of like nobody trusted those platforms. A lot of usage, but not a lot of.
Whoop. 1 second here. I think we lost Robin for a moment. Let's see if we can get him back. Everybody hang in there with us. Robin, did we lose you? Oh, all right. Well, we lost Robin for a moment. He might have run into a Wi-Fi issue. I'm sure he will jump right back in. We only have a couple minutes left, so we got the benefit of most of the time here. For those of you that have kind of hung in with us all the way through, really do appreciate it. I'll post this, and if you've got a question or two in the chat that you want to share, happy to address those. one of the things that I think is super important about this idea of culture and this conversation around culture, we talked about it, that culture is transferable, number one, and that culture builds itself when you attend to it. And I just did a little article about this the other day, that a lot of culture gets built just by happenstance and without the expectation of being specific. And so this idea that, take the time, define who you want to be, define where you want to go, write it down so people understand it, share it with them, coach them through the behaviors that you need, be specific about where you're going, as Robin said, and sort of share that clarity with folks. People will deliver against things they understand. They don't even always have to believe in where it's going all the way, but they just have to have enough faith and trust that where you're headed is a destination that they want to be a part of. And then you've got to curate that environment. You've got to spend time on it. You don't work on culture once, you work on it over and over and over again, and it sort of never stops. And it's just like strategy. It's just like business. It's part of what you do every day. So we'll wrap it up here. I know we lost Robin on the last couple moments, but thank you all for joining the second Top Voice Tuesday. Looking forward to next week. We're going to have Kaleem Clarkson on, and he's going to talk about remote work. So very excited. Let's see here, Robin. Oh, we got you back. Robin, we're just wrapping up.
Was it me? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're just kind of wrapping up. I was summarizing for everyone as we sort of closed up. So I'll give you just a few minutes. I was sharing a bit of a summary. Anything you want to leave us with as we go on here? Outstanding of the little technical issue there.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but yeah, if you enjoyed this conversation, please go connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect and share information, excitement, and so on around culture. It's one of the things I'm most passionate about. I'm also just excited to chat with you, Michael. I love your book. I think it's awesome. I think everybody who's going through organizational growth or change should read that. It's been a real kind of guide for me as I think about how to navigate the next couple of years. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for inviting me in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Please do follow Robin if you haven't yet. His content is fantastic. Your point of view is fantastic. Your work and culture. I know you speak a lot, not at your own company, but also others. So please have him join your company for keynotes and things like that. It's really, as I was saying before you came back on, that my big takeaway from this conversation and the work that I do is, number one, be specific about the culture you want to have. Write it down and make sure people understand what it is and how to deliver on it, and then curate it every day, right? Culture never stops. Right. It's not something you do once. It's not an annual strategy. It's not a quarterly plan. It is an everyday experience that requires you to show up with your say-do ratio intact. And so that is the secret to how to build a culture that where people don't dread Mondays. So thanks for everyone. Thanks for staying a few minutes long. If you did on the tech issue, Robin, great to see you. Excited for our collaboration. We'll see you next time.
See you, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks.